Hello and welcome to the Box Score Network NFL Draft Show. My name is Simon. I'm taking you through my draft grades from this past weekend. This video, we're doing the NFC North. Let's get right down to it. We're going to start with the top grade for me for the NFC North, and that was the Detroit Lions. Detroit hit two of their biggest needs at really key points of the draft at 17 and 50 with a small trade up to 45. Nice job by them being aggressive. They were able to get to the position group wells before they dried up. Those were obviously at offensive tackle at 17 with Blake Miller, and then at 44, going edge rusher. So with what I like about the Blake Miller move is offensive tackle was going to run out soon, right? We saw Caleb Lomu go late in the first round, but they needed to take offensive lineman there if they wanted a starting caliber one. And while I would have preferred Monroe Freeling at that point, who was still available, I understand and appreciate that they had a plan. Dan Campbell said it at the owners' meetings. They wanted to move Penei Sewell over to left tackle. So I think Blake Miller was the right choice to get a day one ready right tackle to take over that spot for Sewell, and while they move him over to the left side. And then edge rusher Derek Moore, getting him there at 44. They jumped a couple teams, made sure they got there before the edge rusher run really ended, which was really important because right around 50, right around 60, that was when that drop off started to happen. So going up and getting Derek Moore there was really, really important for them. My one issue with this draft is at safety. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are recovering from major injuries, and both players I am pretty sure are going to be questionable to start the season on time. With little on the depth chart behind them, I'm surprised they didn't even draft a safety, especially with several good ones available as late as the fourth round. So when the Lions took Jimmy Rolder, the linebacker out of Michigan, guys like Zachy Wheatley, Kilgore, Ramsey. There's a lot of safeties available there in the fourth round that I really thought they were going to go after. Other than that, they do go outside corner, which is good. You always need depth there. Kendrick Law as a wide receiver slash return man is a really good pickup. So they still had a good draft. They had a good draft and safety. Maybe those guys are progressing more than we know on this end, and so maybe that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, this was about getting that offensive line back in good shape. Blake Miller takes care of that, and then trying out another running mate for Aiden Hutchinson on the defensive line in Derek Moore. So good job by the Lions. I thought to have a good draft, take care of some key needs, be aggressive when they needed to. All right, moving on to my next team here, the Green Bay Packers, who I gave a C plus. It wasn't flashy, but the more I look at this draft for Green Bay, the more I like it. With pick 52, you could argue only one player was higher on my board at a position that I thought was a good one for them to take at that point, and that would have been Gabe Akis, the edge rusher. But the drop off of Akis to who they got in the fourth round and Danny Dennis Sutton and a potential outside man corner they could have gotten down there was much shorter. So I like how the stack played out. I'm of course talking about Brandon Cisse, the cornerback that they took in the second round, who I'm not personally a huge fan of because I don't think he likes contact. But late in the second round to get a corner that big who moves and mirrors the way he does is an excellent swing for a team that doesn't have a typical number one corner. They've always kind of just thrown it all together. Gotten some guys who are slots, gotten some guys who are special teamers. So taking a swing like this on him again, when I really only would have put Gabe Akis up there as competition for who I would have taken at 52 for them was great. So after that second round pick, I was looking for the Packers to establish what kind of front they'd be going into this draft, since they've had a lot of back and forth over the years about 3-4, 4-3, hand up edges, hand down edges. But Chris McClellan and Danny Dennis Sutton in those mid round picks are those true big bodies who can play in the middle and on the edge of a traditional 3-4. That's what they've said they wanted their base to be. So I think those guys are going to make a lot of sense in what the defense wants to do. And then the sixth round, they take a swing on a kicker. After the issues they had in that department last year, Brandon McManus went 3 of 7 on field goals from 40 to 49 yards during the season, and 0 for 2 on field goals and 3 of 4 on extra points in that wild card round loss. So the Packers go ahead and take a swing on a kicker. We'll see how that goes. That is Trey Smack out of Florida, hoping he smacks a few balls through the uprights. Packers fans are. All right, next up here we have the Chicago Bears, who I also gave a C plus. I wouldn't say I like the draft quite as much as the Packers, but I think this is still a little bit above average. Through 2 years of the Ben Johnson regime, I'm finding out I just might not be a fan of the way his teams are going to draft. 3 offensive players taken with their first 4 picks coming off of a top 10 offense and bottom 10 defense season. So do we need more cowbell, or in this case, offense? Let's start on day two to talk about those offensive players. Logan Jones in the second round. I get it. I said when they didn't bring in Tyler Biotish after they had the meeting with him and opted for Garrett Barrett, there was probably a center that they were eyeing in the draft. So even though this was maybe a round before Jones was expected to go, they wanted to make sure they got him. Ben Johnson gets the light on his feet, but tough center that works in his offense. And even if the only other true center didn't come off the board until the fourth round, I get going after him early. I know the trend of offenses is having at least one big blocking tight end for 13 personnel, but to go for Sam Roush in the third, I think was a luxury pick for a team that has a huge deficit on the defensive line. And on Thursday night, to go with Dylan Thieneman, I get it. They needed a safety. Many thought he'd go higher than 25, but with so many problems closer to the line of scrimmage, I would have prioritized that. Chicago had a lot of DBs leaving free agency, but they paid Kobe Bryant and still had a trio of experienced corners ready to go. I would have prioritized the defensive tackle or edge and came back to safety later. Caden McDonald was there in terms of a run stuffer. TJ Parker was there in terms of an edge rusher. Guys that, we on this network mocked to the Bears a bunch of times. I would have preferred those moves. So honestly, maybe this should be closer to a C or even a C minus. But the thing is, they got good players like Thieneman, good player. Logan Jones is going to be a good fit. I understand what the offense wants to be and wants to do. It's just, man, can you help out the defense a little bit? So a C plus, we'll call it like a C plus there for the Chicago Bears. We'll see if they draft differently moving forward, or if this will be just kind of a theme for me with Ben Johnson and the Bears. And then finishing things out in the NFC North is the Minnesota Vikings, who I gave a D. And yeah, it was not a good draft for the Vikings. Not a good weekend for the Vikings, really. The Caleb Banks pick might have been the most shocking in the first round, considering his foot injuries and injury concerns. And that's with Ty Simpson going 13 overall to the Rams. For a team that hasn't had a home run first round pick since Justin Jefferson in 2020, a swing on a big defensive tackle that's been dealing with injuries for several seasons is a scary proposition. And I like Caleb Banks. I like his tape a lot. The injuries are scary, man. So first round pick, 18 overall, when you're in the place that Minnesota is right now, is a little scary. Uh, they then provided themselves with some of their own insurance, or just realized that Banks' injury history after they realized what it was after they took him, because they doubled at defensive tackle with the selection of Dominique Orange in the third round. A move on its own, I actually like, as he's a true two gapping run stuffer. But with Jalen Redmond and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins turning heads last year, and the pick of Banks, why do you also need Orange? Especially if you're bypassing bigger positions of need and pushing them late into day three. Center, safety, and corner are all positions you could argue they need a starting caliber player in Minnesota after this draft. And instead, they saved all of those picks, all of those positions, for draft picks starting with their third round comp pick through the seventh round. So this just was not, and not to mention they traded Jonathan Grenard. So they're down one starting edge rusher. They're hoping that Dallas Turner's ready to take that full time. They had a couple veteran defensive tackles leaving free agency because they had some young guys look good, but then they drafted two more young guys to play defensive tackle. Um, they kind of ignored corner and safety, so maybe this is just Brian Flores saying, I really don't need us to focus on that. Just give me guys up front. Which I certainly wouldn't argue with him if that's the case. But just all of this is tough. Now Jake Olday is a good player. I like that pick a lot. Versatile. You talk about like any of these blitzing off ball linebacker types, but he has experience playing in coverage and playing in space as well. So I get that. Caleb Tiernan is good depth at tackle, which they need. But to not go for a center until late in the seventh round, to not go for a corner until the fifth round. And again, two defensive tackles, one being a plugger, the other having the foot issues. The Vikings had a rough weekend, I think. All right. On that positive note, we're going to end this video. We're all done with the NFC North. Thank you all so much. If you have different thoughts, especially about the Vikings, but anybody, send them in the comments. Love to chit chat. And make sure you're back for more of these videos and more draft content for you throughout the spring, summer, and into 2027. So thank you all so much. Have a good one.